Hello, good evening, everybody. I'm here with Mason, and he has been through a hell of a lot. We have got all of his links in the description box, his socials, his channel. Please subscribe and support his important work. And it starts out with him being raised in a cult, and then the temptations of the lifestyle, a demonic battle, a fascination with the occult. Anyway, I'll let him take you through all that. Thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sean. It's I'm honored to be here. I'm happy to be to have the chance to talk to your audience. And you covered some of the bases right off the bat. Yeah, I was born into, I think it was a regular church at one point, but they pretty quickly turned into a cult, and they started believing that they were the only ones who were saved, and there was a lot of weird, freaky stuff going on there, and some. Oh man, how can I say this so that YouTube likes it? There was some unsavory behaviors towards the younger folks, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
And
exactly, we know what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, and there was a guy who actually went to prison for that, who was like a big member of that church. So that was my first introduction. I guess I should say before I go on, yeah, Sovereign Fire Studios. That's what I do. We're a channel. We exist on YouTube and on all other platforms. We exist to edify and encourage current believers. We want to talk to the lost, so we evangelize the lost and expose the false through entertaining content. We try to produce the most, understand as many worldviews as we can, and really tackle a lot of topics. So we tell crazy stories, supernatural stories, guys who went from dealers to prison to being preachers, former witches and occultists like Jack Marino Chen, and authors and guys, pastors who were adulterous and got caught and were restored. We talk a lot about freedom from addiction, and we try to make it entertaining and educational. So that's Sovereign Fire Studios. Anyway,
good for you, man. And the links are all in the description box for you, so please support Mason's work.
Yeah.
If you could just expand a bit then on as a young person, you were born into this cult? Did you say?
Yeah, I was.
Were your parents? Were they indoctrinated into it, or was it generational? That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, well, they joined the church. Their parents were not religious. Neither of their parents were religious, but my mom had this big conversion experience to Christianity and joined this church because they seemed to really, care about the Bible. They really, they were going after Jesus, and then it just devolved into this thing where they were isolationist. It was a really small gathering, and we basically didn't talk to or participate in the community outside of that church. And like I said before, they started to believe that no one else was saved but them, and that set me up for probably the biggest tragedy of my childhood. One of them. Apart from what I mentioned before with unsavory behaviors towards young folks, they believed that if you had enough faith, that God would heal you. That it was all up to you. If you just worked up enough faith, you'd be healed. And my mother contracted cancer. I don't know if you even say contracted. She developed cancer, and it was really aggressive, and she was rapidly declining, and they were all sure she would be healed, totally certain she would be healed. And, she wasn't, she was not, she passed. So that shattered my little 4-year-old worldview.
Oh my God. You were only 4 years old.
Yeah, I was 4 years old, and I had 8 siblings. So I have a twin sister, and then I have 8 biological siblings, 1 half brother, 2 step siblings now. So I was really confused about the world, and I think everyone can relate to this. As a kid, you're just thinking through what is reality? I was forced to think about really philosophical and strange, abstract ideas from a really young age because, like, okay, my mom is ripped from me. I'm raised in this cult that, they teach that God is good, that he's kind, but then I see in reality, it's like he doesn't seem to be. He could have saved my mom. He didn't. All this bad stuff has happened to us with all that stuff. So yeah, I was confused.
With what happened to your mum, and my heart goes out to you. I can't imagine at 4 years old. It's so important to
Yeah.
have that relationship. Did they rely purely on faith at a cost of not letting her get medical treatment? Is that what happened?
I actually am not clear on that. I know she was hesitant to pursue medical treatment. I believe she was hesitant at first, but she did eventually start doing chemotherapy because she had 9 kids. She's like, I'm gonna do whatever I have to do. But yeah, that would have been seen as kind of like you don't have enough faith. You don't have, you're not trusting God enough. It was that kind of culture. Yeah.
Okay, so you're 4 years old. You,
Yeah.
you go through the trauma of losing your mom. You're in this cult.
Hmm.
What's your life like after that
Yeah.
tragedy?
Well, that formed the way I thought about the world. I would lay in bed and be like just thinking about eternity, thinking about the supernatural. I always felt like there was this war over my soul, kind of like uh there were all these dark feelings I had. Like I in Exodus and in Psalm 103, it talks about who God gives his name to his people, and he says, I am the Lord, merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, um, and forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. So he's forgiving, he's loving, and he says, and I will by no means pardon the guilty. He's like, I'm just, I'm gonna punish the guilty. The people who deserve it, they're gonna get it. And for me, I didn't see any of the good parts. I was just like, he seemed to me like the kind of vindictive um, God who is just looking for someone to punish and is kind of like a cosmic killjoy and wants to. I feared him because I'm like, I believe you existed. I mean, Psalm talks about in the Psalms, it talks about how like everybody can see that there's something else going on here in this reality. Like we're conscious. That's incredible. That's amazing. You look at the world around you, look at the stars, the heavens declare the glory of God, the Psalms say. Like you can just look outside and be like, somebody made this stuff. Even your viewers may know about like the Fibonacci sequence or the look at your fingerprint, and all these things in nature testify that they were created by some kind of intelligent force. That's my understanding, at least. So as a kid, I recognized that, and I knew there was a God. I just didn't really think he was good. I thought he was pretty dark and mean. And I was angry all the time. Like I put all my hurt, all my trauma on God, and I hated him, and I was afraid of him. So my dad, or go ahead, Sean.
No, please keep going.
Yeah, my dad remarried, and he remarried like 6 months after my mom died because he's just like my kids need a mom, and I can't do it. He was lost in alcoholism and in grief, and he he remarried. It turned out to be a pretty bad decision because I wanted a mom. I was ready to call this woman my mom. I called her mom. Like I wanted her to be my mother. And about 5 or 6 months into their marriage, she was like, listen, I can't be these kids' mom. I can't do it. I'm not going to try. So she detached, and my dad was already kind of neglectful, alcoholic, detached as well. And it was a painful thing for a kid, definitely. Like I just felt untethered. And so it forced me inward where I started asking these questions like, if why would anything exist at all? Like why I'm not the kind of person who wants to watch a TV show that has no point. And so much less would I want to exist in a world where there is no point. Like if everything is just nothing, we're all just kind of atoms bouncing around, doing our best, fleshy robots. I'm like, this is goofy. I never could believe that. And so then I started thinking about the concept of the creator. If he's good, he also has to punish sinners. I mean, he has to punish the worst of the worst, like Adolf Hitler. Like that guy can't be anywhere good. If he was, I'd be upset about it, but then even if he's perfect, he has to punish even the small things like lies and stealing or lusting, etc. And so I knew pretty early on. I'm like, I'm in trouble because I do all those things and worse things. From the time I was 9, I was just like immersed in shame and secrecy, all of that pain from my childhood. I just sought escapes. Like I looked for escapes anywhere, and so music was huge for me. You had a guest on that toured with Sublime. I think he I forget what his name was, but he and I thought about music similarly, where it was just like that was my whole world. Every time I would feel overwhelmed by grief or sadness or really any emotion, I would turn to music and would just listen all the time to these. And I would imagine myself like shredding guitar solos or being the lead singer. That was my dream. And so that's where that dream started to really take form in my heart. And then I found other escapes as well. Because the music I was listening to fed these dark impulses that I had, like all of the mainstream artists that I listened to. I won't say their names because it might flag you or something. I don't know. YouTube is their YouTube. So, but they glorified violence and depravity and like an attitude of like do whatever you want, no matter what, no matter who it hurts. Just do whatever you want. That's what makes you cool. That's what makes you manly, is to just do whatever you want. And so I did my best to imitate that. And I was, as I grew up, as I was 9, I first was introduced, and I'll say this sensitively. Man, I really don't like censoring myself, but I have to every time I'm on YouTube. So I was introduced to adult material online at about 9 years old, and the internet was a much less regulated place than it is now. And so I was introduced to the most vile, dark things imaginable. Whatever you're thinking, it was that, and it was worse, is what I was seeing. And I was immediately hooked because I'm like terrified and shocked and traumatized by these images, but also I'm like, how can I get back to that feeling almost immediately? It's a strange concept, but yeah, you do return to what traumatizes you. And so I was that was another huge escape for me. And I felt like nobody would love me if they knew the things that I was looking at, the things that I was doing. So those were the two big ones. The two big escapes were music and adult material. And the things I secretly took pleasure in really, it horrified me to think that if anybody knew, like if this came out that I was seeing these things, that I loved these things, I would be, no one would love me. And it just reinforced this shame of like, my stepmom doesn't want me. My real mom is gone. My dad is detached. My family's falling apart. Like I didn't mention that, but my siblings, we were all a mess. Like my older sisters were on substances. I was just running amok. And so it reinforced the fact that like I'm really dirty and trashy and nobody would love me. But I didn't know, like looking back, had I just opened my Bible, that would have helped me a lot, because like if you even just a cursory reading of the Bible, just glance at it, you'll see Abraham, lies about his wife. He's a liar. Moses disobeys God. David, David, come on. Can we, he did some really nasty things that we can't even mention here. He did the R word. He unalived someone. He was, and somehow all of these people are tied into God's story, and he redeems them. So that's the whole question of the Bible, is like, how is he merciful and gracious, slow to anger, kind to these people who deserve to be punished by him? Like, if he's really good, he's got to do something with people who do the R word, people who unalive other people. He's got to. You get to the New Testament, it's the same thing. It's like Paul he unalived folks, and he was a really bad guy. So what, how does God, how can he be just and good and also forgive these people? So if I would have opened my Bible, I would have seen verses like, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, or there is none righteous, no, not one. They've all have sinned, all have turned aside, they've altogether become corrupt. That every person stands condemned before God, and that's by nature of our birth. Like, when we're old enough to start sinning, we do it and we love it. I've got 3 little kids now, and I tell them like not to do something, and it almost is just like they're like, oh, now I want to, I can see it. And so I probably would have got some, like, at least some consolation, like, okay, I'm not the only one. But I didn't know any of that at the time. So I felt like I was the worst person on the face of the planet, and there was nobody who would love me if they knew it. And
Mason,
yeah.
if you're growing up in a cult,
Mm-hmm.
other people that we've interviewed, they think what's going on around them is normal.
Yeah.
And there comes a point in the story when they realize they're in a cult. Now, you touched on this earlier, but could you expand on that? What woke you up? How did you react to it? Was there a mental struggle? Did you consult your siblings? What was...
Yeah, that's a great question, Sean. I actually didn't realize that I was in a cult until I was much older. Like, because we kind of retained what we had learned in this system of belief, and then we went to other churches here and there. Like, my dad was semi-religious. He's like, we need to go to church to be good, and that's kind of how I felt about it too. It's like, we should all do our best to be good, and maybe we can be good enough to go to heaven, which is not the story of the Bible. We'll get into that later on. But like, I didn't realize we were in a cult until I was much older. And I mean, like 16, 17 years old. I didn't even realize, because it took a long time for the programming to fade. And I think when that happened is when I started seeing other cults, and talking to my siblings, especially my older brothers. They helped me a lot because I was young. I just thought it was normal, like you said, like hellfire, brimstone preaching, somebody yelling at you from the stage every day, going to church 4 times a week, not seeing anyone else, not communicating with anyone outside the church. That was all just normal stuff to me. So it wasn't until much later that I actually was like, wow, we were really in a bad spot.
All right, as you're going through this realization, then, is part of your brain pulling you away from it, and the other part of you is still thinking, this is what I've been used to my whole life? And also, did you consult anyone within your family about this process?
Yeah, I think the thing that hit me first, because I would have considered myself a Christian even as I think I stopped when I was around 9, was into these adult materials, was really trying to escape my pain through music and through these other things, through this just fantasy world. And I I deconstructed internally, but we were all afraid to like talk about what we were realizing. Like I think the shame of what had been done to us as children, and it was a big part of it because my family was affected by that. We were all kind of subject to the evils that were done in the cult. And then, and I talk more about this on Sovereign Fire Studios on some episodes I've done, but there's this, the thing about cults is you don't realize you're in a cult because there's all these walls built up around you. You're isolated, and then once you get out, you're taught to like have your own walls. And so we didn't start talking about even the things that had been done to us as children until much later, and usually under the influence of some kind of substance. We would be drinking, and we'd be like, "Hey, you remember this?" And they're like, "Yeah, I remember that." And that's kind of how we started consulting one another. And I started learning about other worldviews around the time I was like 10, probably. So we went to school with a lot of Mormons. We went to school with like, I learned about atheism and about New Age perspectives that kind of blend Eastern mysticism and Christianity and kind of cherry pick whatever seems best in all religions. And I kind of went down that path. I distrusted the Bible. I'd never read it, of course. I knew more than like most professing Christians about it, but I'd never like read it front to back. But I was like, it seems to me like all these religions are just, all these different cultures are seeing the same thing and pointing at it and calling it something different in their own religion, and maybe all these roads lead to the same thing, which is a great thought. It'd be cool if that were true, but these individual religions actually make claims to exclusivity, so they don't leave you the room to say they're all true. Like a Muslim would never say, the Quran is very clear that all other religions are false. Mormons would even say their religion is true. Their prophet, Joseph Smith, was the true prophet after Jesus, and there is no other truth. And likewise, I mean, Christianity, Jesus even said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." The God of the Bible, he says in Exodus, the first commandment, "You shall have no other gods before me," and not before me like above me. That means no other gods in my sight before me. Like when someone says, "Put this thing before me," they mean put it in, so that I can see it. In Isaiah, he says, "I am the Lord, and there is no other. Besides me, there is no God." And so Christianity does not leave room for you to pick what you like about it and put it in and plug it in. You can do that, but just know that it's inconsistent logic. And
all right, going back to your mental processes, then
yeah,
you realize you're in a cult. You're starting to realize it. You fully realize it, and then do you rebel against it?
oh yeah, baby. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I was a bad kid.
What age were you rebelling at?
Oh, I was rebelling from like the start. I mean, I was rebelling whenever I was like 5. Me and my older stepbrother would just wrestle for hours. I remember like throwing him into a barbed wire fence. So it started out with kind of acts of anger and violence, but then it developed into that part of my rebellion was the music that I listened to, this incredibly aggressive and just like hedonistic music that I knew my parents wouldn't like. And I was playing it all the time, just listening to it. I would paint symbols from like Led Zeppelin, for example. They had Aleister Crowley, who's a famous occultist. He came out of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is a very popular, or one of them. It's like the quintessential occultist magical order. And I actually had a woman on the podcast who converted to Christianity from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Her name is Jack Moreno Chin. She is she's really awesome. You can go and listen to that video on Sovereign Fire Studios. That's my channel. But the your question was, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, did I rebel? That's the guy. There he is.
That's him, Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, he looks unsavory, and he was. I mean, he was, dude. He was really. He delighted in the fact that he was very evil. He at the end of his life, in fact, he was convinced that the way you honored the devil, the way you gained the most magical power, is by doing the most detestable, disgusting thing and learning to love it. So that was like the crux of his teachings, were it all pinnacled on, really, if you could do the most disturbing thing you can imagine and learn to love it, that is how you would garner the most magical abilities. And by magic, I mean, to define terms a little bit, magic with a K is basically manipulating the natural world or the outcome of events through supernatural or mysterious means. So you are dipping into secret knowledge or convening with spirits or these invisible beings to control the outcome of events or to manipulate the natural world. And that was what he was all about. So anyway, Led Zeppelin featured him on one of their covers, and some other occultist sayings and incantations or spells, and I would paint those on my wall. I was really fascinated with them, and that kind of got me into the occult. So I rebelled through music. I was always in trouble at school for soliciting, not soliciting. Yeah, I was the substance guy. I was the plug. And so I also was just trying to be high all the time. So I would have stuff at school, and got a number of Class A felonies for that. So yeah, I was a rebel.
So as you were getting into the occult, then, what do you mean? Things like Ouija boards, that kind of activity?
Yeah, I always had a little bit of a fear of Ouija boards. I played with one once, but I was like, the horror movies seem to, I didn't want to be possessed, like I just wanted to see the cool stuff and have powers, or like be enlightened or empowered in some way. I didn't want to be like full on possessed. So I started to get into that. And the occult is just like anything forbidden and taboo knowledge to gain power, to manipulate your world. And I was really fascinated by that. My older brother was too, and so we kind of fed off of each other. And the music we listened to really glorified that too. So I as I started to get in more trouble throughout school, I also had my first relationships with women or girls at this time, because I'm in like middle school and high school. And that I treated people really poorly. I was like a class clown. I was always, down to, if somebody would dare me to do something, I would do it. And I just wanted to be loved. I wanted to be liked. I wanted affirmation. I found my identity in like what people thought of me. And I'm sure there are listeners who can relate to that. Like, if people thought I was dumb, or if I was embarrassed, or if I didn't have like the kind of clothes other people had or whatever, I felt like that my whole self-worth was tied up in what people thought of me. But at the same time, I was never allowed to let my guard down with people. I never really let them know who I was. And so I felt totally unknown, rejected all the time. Even when people praised me, I was like, yeah, but that's not really me. You don't know the real me. Because I knew I was watching all this stuff online. I was, into this occult stuff I knew people weren't into. And I think that started to be incorporated into my identity. Like, well, I know stuff that you don't know. Like, I know stuff about the new age, especially when I started to get into substances and alcohol at 15. I I mean, I at 15 years old, I was doing L, and like had my, I felt like I knew the secrets of the universe because I had done these psychedelics, and I'm like, you guys are, you think school's important? Like, you don't know. And this gave me this, like, I was so prideful, and that really started to become my identity. And I would still say, like, yeah, I'm a Christian. I believe that that's true, because I believed like Jesus was a real person. No historian worth their salt would be like Jesus didn't exist. He definitely existed. He changed the world. There's the most art in the world. Uh, he is the subject of the most art, most music, most literature. He is the subject of the most creation of art than any other human figure in history. So, like, no one can deny he really existed, and we have accounts of him. But I just kind of incorporated him into whatever else I was doing, because at the time I'm like, I'm not gonna stop doing all these things that he calls sin that I love, like the adult content I'm watching, the substances I'm using. I was a liar, a manipulator. I was coercive, very hateful, and always secretly depressed and like I was really selfish, but also detested myself and was disgusted with myself.
Did the substances open you up to demonic energy? And did
Yeah.
you have any visuals in that realm?
Yeah, for sure. I did. I Man, the first time I did L, I had this vision of like a uh, a balcony up above me, and like I was overwhelmed with this sense of joy and like peace, and there was this balcony of my loved ones welcoming me. They're like, "Oh, come up." And so I had like real sense of like like I was really figuring something out, and purpose and meaning. And then as soon as it was gone, as soon as I wasn't tripping anymore, like I felt like, oh man, I didn't come away with anything. And I know with some substances you do come away with something, but normally it's like not a profound realization. Like the things that I would say is like, man, I saw this field of energy. It was connecting everything and me with the universe, and with other people and the animals. And it's like, okay, well, that's not very profound at all. Even a child could tell you, like, yeah, we all have a life force that kind of makes us special. That connects all of us. It's not a profound realization at all. Um, but I used L a lot. I also started to use amphetamines a lot because I just wanted to be I just wanted to be out of my pain. So that was what I could get. And also, I don't even know if I'm allowed to say this class of substances, but yeah, painkillers. I loved painkillers. I had a friend whose mom had cancer, and we would use her painkillers and anxiety medications. And so I would go to school and just be outside my mind, like falling over desks and falling asleep in class and getting taken out of the school in handcuffs. Everybody was like, Mason's pretty nice. He's a good kid. He's got a lot of potential. Um, like, let's take it easy on him. But they were also like, you keep wrecking it, man. And I felt like I was cursed. I really did. From a young age, I'm like, I grew up in this crazy cult environment. I've been exposed to these real dark times, and I always felt like there was this evil energy kind of hovering around me, even before I started taking psychedelics and these substances. And so I but yeah, to explain some of those supernatural experiences, like I would wake up and feel like there was somebody in the room. Like, and that's a normal phenomenon for children, but like I would feel like there was someone in the room, and the person in the room hated me and really had bad intentions for me, and this feeling wouldn't leave. Or there were times where we had physical manifestations of stuff. Like there was often, we lived way out in the country, and we would be sitting around in the dark, and just flash of light, no clouds, no anything, flashes of lights would come through the window. And so much so that we actually like had a joke that there was a stalker or somebody was taking pictures. I don't think that was happening at all. I think there was stuff going on. My sister would see like a person made of TV static come out of her closet from time to time, and we would hear. This sounds so goofy, but like a bump in the night is a term for a reason. But there was a time, literally, whenever we heard someone hit the side of the house when we were playing like Nintendo 64, and it was so loud that it shook the floor. And so we ran to bed and hid under the covers. But I think like there was another time also I was listening to metal super loud, and over the metal, I heard someone like shout my name, like very shockingly. So much, it scared me so much. I took off my headphones, ran downstairs. I was like, "Who needs me? Who said my name? Why did you yell at me?" And they're all like, "We've been in the kitchen. Nobody has said anything to you." And so that kind of stuff was pretty regular. But once I started using these substances, then I encountered real beings that, like, I was familiar with them. I recognized they had been around, but they started to manifest like physically, like in mirrors or in darkness. And yeah, it was pretty spooky. I think probably the most demonic substance that I used wasn't even a psychedelic, though. It was probably a type of amphetamine, where I would stay up for days and do whatever I wanted, and just was perverse and spiraling downward. And I would hear voices pretty constantly, and like telling me to do things that would harm me, telling me to do really disgusting, shameful things. And it was around that time where I started to realize, like, I always knew, okay, there is a right thing. There is a right thing. Everyone knows this intuitively. There are some things that happen in the world, or that we see people do. You read a headline and you're like, well, that's evil. And the only reason we can say, well, that's evil, is because we have some idea of what right is and what righteousness is. And the only way you can know a crooked stick is crooked is if you have some idea of what a straight stick looks like. And we all intuitively know it's wrong to harm other people. It's wrong to lie. It's wrong to steal. It's wrong to commit adultery. These are things we know intuitively, and it actually doesn't change much culture to culture. Even if the culture is like raising people to believe that it's true, it takes a lot to convince someone that is actually right. So as I was using these substances and really getting immersed in everything from DMT and L and MDMA and all of the stuff. I don't actually know what I can say or not on YouTube and what will get us kicked. I think probably the pharmaceutical companies is the ones that they don't want me to name. So, but yeah, I was doing these psychedelics and hallucinogens and amphetamines and all these different classes of drugs, disassociatives. And what the Bible calls those, there's a word for that. And they use sorcery for that. There's a word, pharmakeia, in the Greek. And it refers to the use of like potions, substances, spells, and it's often associated with immorality of the body. You know what I mean? Like, so doing things with other people you ought not do, or with young folks that you ought not do. And so the word pharmakeia, sorcery, it's associated with witchcraft, magical arts, and it's side by side with idolatry and this specific type of immorality, which is interesting that you can even see that in history. When L became popular, the revolution of the 70s happened, right? And it's like, there's all this, we're free from all these, constraints that were put on us by our fundamentalist parents, and we can do whatever we want. And, freedom, it's interesting. Freedom is an interesting concept. If you're free to do whatever you want, you actually become a slave to your own desires. And even like the top philosophers recognize, hedonism is a shortcut to depression and to self-destruction. If you just do whatever you want when you want to do it, live for the thrill of it, that runs out, because there's the law of diminishing returns, first of all. So as you pursue what you want over and over, you get less and less reward in it. The brain science shows this, that your dopamine hits are less, all of the pleasure chemicals, they lessen, but the itch gets bigger. So the craving for it grows. And that is what happens in addiction. And so as I was just like doing whatever I wanted, I really was suffering from this crippling depression and anxiety. So I've mentioned I was arrested 4 times in high school. I thought I had this secret knowledge and these great like revelations about the universe and how everything is connected. And I've seen and communicated and communed with these beings on hallucinogens, and all of you guys are kind of stupid, and I'm enlightened. And all of these religions, really, they're the same. They go the same direction. It doesn't matter what you do; you'll end up, as to be absorbed by the universe's, light, energy, or power, or whatever. And I loved myself. I was very prideful, and at the same time, super depressed, disgusted with myself over the things I was doing in private. It's a paradox, but it was true. Like I really loved my sin. I thought I was the best ever, and then in private, I was like, I'm the worst person that ever lived.
What was your lowest moment as a teenager?
Oh, well, I went to juvie one time over like a holiday weekend, and that was no fun. And juvie, for you, I don't know if they have that word.
What were you busted for on that occasion?
Man, I can't even remember. I think I was like, it was definitely having a substance on school property.
And going into juvie, was that intimidating?
Kind of. It was more sad than anything, like, because in those times when everything was ripped away from me and I didn't have, there were none of my friends, quote unquote friends were there. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any substances to get me through. Those were the times whenever I would feel this approach of a different entity, a different kind. And I knew it was God. I knew God was there. There was this call to turn from my sin. And I hated that idea of that. I was just like, how am I going to deal with my pain? How am I going to get any pleasure if I don't have these sins that I love to fall back on? And so like while I was in juvie, a guy visited me and like gave me a Bible and a pamphlet, and I read some of it and I would pray, but my prayers were like, God, get me out of here. I'm sorry for all my sins. I'll try to be better. I promise I'll be better. Just get me out of here. And that was one of my lowest moments, I think, as a teenager. But then I graduated, and I had been to rehab. My parents sent me to rehab a few times whenever I was going throughout high school. And in rehab, they taught me manifestation. Some of your viewers may already know what that is, but it's basically like a modern form of magic. What I mentioned before, magic being the power to influence the natural world using mysterious powers or supernatural forces. And so manifestation is really like the core of magic. It's just without any specific ritual or rite or incantation or spell. But there is an incantation part of it, which is like speaking words to conjure power to change your world. And so they taught us manifestation in this rehabilitation center. And I was obsessed with it because I'm like, I want to be famous. I want to be a music star. You know, I want all the wealth and the fame and power and glory that comes with that. And that had become a huge part of my identity from the time I was a kid, was to be this famous, you know, just to blow up and be, you know, to live fast and, you know, be unalived young and burn out like a dying star, you know. And I saw things happen that I thought I would attribute to my manifestations and my positive affirmations. Everyone knows those; they're very popular right now. And you know, I would repeat these things every morning, at night, throughout the day, just like imagining myself calling these things into reality that didn't exist yet, and imagining myself driving my awesome car with the wind blowing through my hair in Hollywood, and with my hot girlfriend, and you know, like on my way to practice for a giant show, or you know, playing to adoring fans. It sounds goofy, but literally this is so popular, you know, and it's so accepted that like, this is how you change your reality. And like, this is a new revelation, you know, The Secret, the book The Secret, or the movie The Secret. They act like this is this new science. It's kind of scientific too, and you know, we can prove it. It's like, this is it's ancient. This is not, and this is what people have been doing from the beginning of time. And the Bible even speaks to that Adam and Eve in the garden, the first sin is the serpent tells them, you will be like God, knowing good and evil. He's like, exalt your will above your creator. You'll create your own reality. He just doesn't want you to be like him. And so they fall for it and take it. And it's that same lie retold, the power to influence the natural world using these mysterious forces like manifestation or positive affirmations or secret knowledge. And it's just repackaged for people. And maybe somebody doesn't like to hear that, but I recognize that as like a 16-year-old, that this was let me say something. So the reason the Bible prohibits this, like in Deuteronomy or in Leviticus, says, do not turn to mediums or necromancers, do not seek them out, and so make yourselves unclean by them. The reason it prohibits communing with invisible entities, spiritual forces, talking to the dead, worshiping idols, or what we would, from a Christian world, call demons. The reason it prohibits that is not because there's no power there. It's not like God's like, hey, don't do this thing because I don't like it when you do this thing. There's nothing to it, but don't do it. That's not what God says. God, instead, he says, there is power there, and it is evil, and I prohibit it because I want you to flourish. I want you to, he desires our highest joy, which is found in him. And that was something I was not privy to as a kid. So I thought I'd discovered these, this way to control my life. And I didn't realize that the Bible speaks really clear to it. Like in Deuteronomy, it's almost the clearest. He says, there shall not be found among you anyone who unalives his son or daughter, which was a famous thing to do for an offering, still is today. That's another discussion though. Anyone who practices divination or tells fortunes or interprets omens, or a sorcerer, which was me, a sorcerer, so a user of substances, or a charmer, or a medium, or a necromancer, or one who inquires of the dead. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord. And because of these abominations, that he says, like, because of these things, this is why I drove the other nations out. Not because there's no power there, but because they are in slavery to these invisible evil forces, and they've rejected me, their creator. And so I guess to get back on track to what I was, to where I was in the beginning, I thought I was super wise. I discovered all this stuff in rehab. And like Romans 1 says, claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of God for images of created things. Like I was making myself God, putting myself in his place. And in Romans 1, it talks about how God eventually just gives you over to the desires of your heart. And that's your punishment. The punishment for sin is often more sin. The punishment for rebelling against God is sometimes he just gives you free reign. And that's what happened to me.
All right, so you covered your teenage years excellently. What about when you turned 20? Where were you at that point in your life?
Wow. Yeah. When I turned 20, that was whenever I started using H, the old
Oh my
horse.
goodness.
You know, so I was really after the maximum amount of pleasure with the least amount of effort. So that's why I started being the plug for people. And I really got a big sense of meaning and purpose from that. I was in this band. We had mild success. We were kind of, we were what we thought was a big deal locally. We opened up for like Afro Man and Harmar the Superstar, and like we thought we were a big deal. And so that was a big sense of identity as well. But I was everybody's plug. Like everybody knew if you want like the pristine, what do they call them? Designer substances, get this guy's number. And I got a lot of comfort from that. So I started using H. Man, I had a jumbo sized tackle box, and you know how they have the compartments. I had a and if no one knows what I mean by H, it is like
the brown, injecting the brown.
Injecting the brown. That's right. Yeah. I was doing the brown, and I was doing the brown and the go fast at the same time. I like what they called a speedball. Was I wanted the whole thing. Yeah, boy. They also call it, rather than girl, which would be the white. And so, yeah, I was like, at this point, I had a plug through the dark web. I had a partner in business where we would procure big balls of white, brown, Colombian, Peruvian. Like we got pure AMP, if anyone knows what that is. Like you think of the 50s housewife with the vacuum cleaner, and they're like, it'll put you in a good mood and help you lose weight. Well, we got the active ingredient for that in its purest form. So we had that. I was dropping my own L on sheets. Would buy the blotter paper and drip it out with rubber gloves on. I remember one time I spilled some on the counter, and I was just like, I'll mop it up with the sheet, and everybody just kind of gets what they get. Somebody got like a quadruple hit, and somebody probably got a regular hit. But so this was a time of real, and I say none of that to glorify this stage. This was probably my most empty, saddest part of my life. Like I would wake up in the middle of the night sobbing. I have a little brother who has Down syndrome, and he would come to my mind because he was like my best friend. He always wanted to be just like me, and I hadn't spoken to him in years. I had not spoken to him in years. And so I would wake up and his face would, I know now God was bringing his mind to my face to remind me of like innocence and the damage I was doing to people. And so, yeah, the reason I was where I was at the time was I lived with my girlfriend, and my dad had kicked me out finally. He'd given me so much grace. He was a Christian. He'd got broken out of the old like cult ways of thinking and was reading the Bible for himself. And he was like, you can't stay here anymore. I have to protect your other siblings. So that's when I went off the deep end. The band was blowing up locally, doing great, and I also had all of these substances I wanted at my fingertips all the time. And so I was like hooked on it all. I mean, I wish I could I mean, I nerd out on substances a little bit, but I had like gamma hydroxybuprine yeah, the like the I shouldn't nerd out as much as I do over these things, but the the phase I was in at this time was utter darkness. Like people people didn't the thing about when you have any level of fame or notoriety for something, especially something that people need or want, like a substance, is that then you don't know who your friends are, and it feels like everybody wants something from you rather than wants to be with you. And so and to the person who asked how I was making the money to get these things from the dark web, was making it. It was started off with a front for my business partner, and he bought all the stuff. He was like, he was like my rally. I was this little pusher, and he's like, do this. So we would get thousands of, the anxiety drug that starts with an X. We would get thousands of those at a time and sell them as packs, and then that we would re-up, and that's how we got money. So, but I attributed all this to like, I manifested this. This is what I wanted. I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to have the maximum amount of substances and control my reality at all times. And this paired with the occultic behaviors, I became like a bona fide occultist and was worshiping what I knew to be devils, or demons, or these unclean spirits for the sake of power. I thought it was a shortcut to fame, a shortcut to success in music, and all of my, idols in music. They were all kind of like, it was like the unspoken thing. Like if you want to be the best, you gotta give all of yourself. You gotta sell it, man. So I was doing blood magic. I would, man, it's hard to talk about these things, but at this point in my life, when I was in my 20s, 20 through 22, or 21, I had night terrors constantly, sleep paralysis, because I was inviting demons to live in my body and give me powers not my own, so that I could be, boosted to success. And I was practicing manifestation, practicing ritual magic, practicing S magic, and so using other people and their and our relations for magical practices, and yielded myself to demonic forces. So I would even like bow down to idols and drink. I was drinking bodily fluids and studying the life of Aleister Crowley and other really wicked men. I would hear voices. I'd wake up paralyzed in the night. I would get stuck in trances where I would feel like an entity crawl up on my chest, especially after I started using a certain substance. I feel like really like unlocked a different kind of power, evil power on me. So I would wake up with this thing hovering above my face, and I could feel its breath and its presence, and it would like, I was unable to move. I was paralyzed. I even had a time where I was tripping on something. I know I can't say this, or in the past it's kind of a hot button one, but I was doing this substance, and woke up in what looked like a ship of some kind, or like a space that was round, and there was all these little creatures that Timothy Leary called machine elves, is what he called them. It's a common like thing to see, an entity to see, and they made up this giant presence, this giant face. It was a male entity, and I was paralyzed, and they were scanning me from like head to toe, scanning me like a scientific procedure or something. And that freaked me out pretty bad, because they were telling me, you shouldn't be here. How can you see us? You shouldn't be here. And cursing me and stuff. And so, yeah, I was a slave to my desires and to whatever my flesh wanted. Ephesians 2 talks about that. Like it says, and you were unalive in the trespasses and sins in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience. And he's talking about the devil. And that's a shocking verse because it says, even if you just, hey, go with the flow, do your own thing, you are a slave to the devil. You are walking in the ways of your flesh. And it says, but he gives comfort after that in Ephesians 2. He says, among whom we all once lived. Like we were all like that. I'm not better than anyone listening, or someone who's practicing new age things, someone who's practicing mediumship, or practicing anything that the Bible calls an abomination or sin. I did all of that. And he says, so in Ephesians 2, he's like, among whom we all once lived, carrying out the desires of the body and the mind. And like we did whatever we wanted. And we were by nature children of wrath like the rest of mankind. So then again, you have what I started with in the beginning. Like there's this problem that we're all children of wrath like the rest of mankind. And so how can we be forgiven? And that was something I grappled with a lot in those years, is like, I've done some egregious things that even my fellow, criminals would agree is like, that's particularly evil. That's very, very nasty. And I believe that the devil was rewarding me with drugs and secret knowledge and power and notoriety as a musician. Yet in these times of silence, like in the middle of the night, when my head hit the pillow, or whenever I was in trouble with the law, I would feel God approach me and intervene. And I knew it was him because there was a holy fear, like an awe. I was like, oh, wow, this is something different coming. But there was a purity and a love, the pure love, like one that didn't fade away. Like whenever I would do MDMA or some of these other substances, I would feel overwhelmed with joy and love, but then it would turn it, like right as soon as the substance was gone, it's like the worst feeling you've ever had in your life, like the biggest come down ever. There was none of that. It was this holy, kind approach, but at the same time, it's like, this is my creator. And I just knew that intuitively. And he would intervene, but I always rejected him. Like I even told him one time I was praying and I was like, stop getting in my way. I want the drugs. I want these substances. I want my own desires. Stop getting in my way. And so I think he did take his hand off me. I mean, I got to the point where, like, after every new substance I used, after every show we played as a band, after every new partner that I had complete emptiness and just unimaginable crushing darkness. It was like tangible darkness, like hard to breathe in the room kind of darkness. I would be like trembling, sobbing, having a panic attack, writing all of the substances I had taken this day, just in case the ambulance has to come and they need to resuscitate me. And I remember writing like, it didn't work. You feel terrible. It didn't, like, these things are not working. And I talk more about that on Sovereign Fire Studios. I talk about the night that I had my OD, and
was that your near-death experience night?
That was, yeah.
Yeah, let's go through that slowly then.
Okay, so yeah, by this point I had a nervous breakdown because of this. It's not good to take 7 substances all at once every day. It's not good for a growing boy. It's not good. So I had a nervous breakdown and lost my mind. And my girlfriend's parents took me to the hospital, or no, my girlfriend's sister took me to the hospital, and I wigged out in there and had the worst time ever, and literally felt like I was falling into the abyss multiple times while I was laying in my bed. Just like I would feel like I was falling into hell. And I got out of there eventually and was like a shell of myself, but I couldn't think about anything else other than just getting back to the band, back to substances, etc. And so I lived with my sister for the time. I was clean from boy. I was clean from the brown, from horse. I was clean from go fast. The speed at the same time. But I would use anything I could get. Like the only reason I didn't have those things is because I was cut off from them from the time being. And my business partner and I had a falling out. So because he happened to be my sister's partner, and she found out that we were doing business together and was very upset. And so, which is better than, I guess, a competitor unaliving you. It's better than or any number of things that could have happened. So I was living with her, and I was like, I'm gonna go get some stuff from my ex-girlfriend's house. She was my ex-fiance actually at the time, because I had proposed to her whenever I was all hopped up. And I went over there, was picking up some clothes and other stuff, and I found a vial of a high potency sedative slash, it is kind of a psychedelic. It's definitely a dissociative.
The horse tranquilizer.
No, actually, it was a different thing. The horse tranquilizer was what I would use a lot, at music festivals or just for recreation. And I saw some beings, some entities that way. But this was a different thing. And I would use these high potency sedatives because I was also using go fast late into the night. And so to sleep, I had to give myself high doses of really potent dissociatives or sedatives to even sleep. And so what I did was I found this vial. It was a big vial. It was like that big around, that tall, and it had about like this much of the potion in it. Again, pharmakeia. It is it's sorcery, trying to manipulate my natural the natural world through these mysterious potions and things. This is an ancient practice, and that the Bible condemns. And I knew that. I knew I was condemned by God, but I'm like, I'm gonna have one last hurrah. So I took a swig of this stuff, and it's interesting. This stuff is like really salty. So I took some of it, and I knew I took like more than I normally would have, but also I didn't have a tolerance at this time, and I had forgotten that. So anyway, I gather my things. I don't feel much at all. Kind of feels like I took a shot or something, and I get into the Uber that I'm going, and I stop by Walmart and pick some things up. I get back in the car, and I'm talking to this dude who's driving me in an Uber, and it's just all of a sudden I take a bite of a Snickers, and I'm chewing, talking to him. And I look over, and then I'm gone. There was no, like, anyone who's used substances heavily. I had lots of ODs where I was like, it's happening, and I had time to be like, God, forgive me of my sins, whatever. Please have mercy on me, because stuff gets real when that happens. But this time it was just lights out, man. Gonzo. I was done. And that was, it should have been a big wake up call for me. So what had happened was I threw up and inhaled it. I asphyxiated. I, seized, fell back, and choked on my own vomit. And so I woke up in the hospital because the Uber driver actually he did the best thing. He said, he helped me. He took me to the place where he called the ambulance to meet him at the place where he was taking me. And had he not done that, I have no idea what would have happened. Because as I said before, like, I was the most wretched type of person you can imagine, like the worst things you can imagine. I loved those things and did them often. And so I I woke up in the hospital, thought I'd been abducted by aliens. And the first thing I wrote in the hospital, I give some details, but I didn't give this detail on the Sovereign Fire Studios episode on my channel. But the first thing they gave me a pad and some paper because I realized I couldn't talk. And this was the way that most of my friends had passed, was through asphyxiation. And so they gave me this pad and a pen, and my sister's crying, and she gives me this pen, and I wrote, in scribbly, like childlike handwriting, more pain meds. Like I was immediately back to, I wanted to be, I was trying to escape. And my dad confronted me in the hospital, and he was like, listen, son, it was just he and I. He's like, everyone else was being really nice to me. My sisters were rubbing my feet with lotion and painted my toenails, and they thought they were having fun with it. Because I was intubated and couldn't talk, and they handcuffed me to the bed because I couldn't move. And so I was. Oh, and I should mention, I guess I give more details on Sovereign Fire Studios on the episode I did on my channel, but I had by this point done rites and rituals in which I had signed my name in blood in a leather-bound journal to bind myself to the devil, because I wanted to be powerful. I wanted wealth. I wanted to be famous, and so I had given myself away, and I already felt like I'm going to hell, so I might as well make the most of it. And so my dad, right? He comes to me in the hospital, sits with me. And he's like, son, I knew as soon as I got a call that you were in the hospital, I knew you were gone. And so I prayed, and I actually have the post still. There's a Facebook post my dad put out, and he basically just said, my son is addicted to dope. He can't get off the stuff. He is, and the devil's trying to take him right now. Pray. I need you to pray. And so hundreds of people were praying for me, unbeknownst to me. And he said, as soon as I got the call, I knew you were gone, and I prayed that God would give you a second chance. And he has. And that kind of was like a little bit of a wake-up call, because I knew it was true. But it actually doesn't matter if you know something's true unless you submit to it and yield yourself to it. And I just was unwilling. I was unwilling to let go of these sins that I loved. And I didn't know how to live without these substances, the affirmation of people, the love of, the quote unquote love of people. I was known as the guy, like, oh, you're the singer in that band. You're or like, oh, you can get these really obscure chemicals and substances. I was the sorcerer guy, I was the dude. And so I had no idea who I was outside of that. But he gave me an ultimatum and was like, I'll pay for you to go out to an out-of-state rehabilitation center if you'll go. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it. Because I didn't feel like I had another choice. I didn't have a place to live, and I was afraid of losing literally everything. And I didn't want to be like homeless again. I had already been homeless at one point, and so I was like, I'll do this thing to appease my dad. So he drove me up to Memphis to a rehab called Adult and Teen Challenge, which it is what it sounds like. It is a challenge. Like, it's a 12-month program, live in. It's it's inpatient rehab. They're not a medical facility. So they are not like, hey, we'll give you your buprenorphine, we'll give you your whatever to help you come down. They're like, by the time you get here, you better be able to sleep, wake up on time, and eat, because like we don't give anything except like cough medicine if you have a cold or whatever. And so I get there, these people are freaking me out. I was full of rage, and because I was consistently hearing voices and seeing images against my will by this time, because I had purposefully yielded myself and given myself over to evil presences, and been consulting with them regularly, doing what they asked me to do to gain power and to gain fame. And so by the time I got to this rehab, I'm like sitting around all these guys who are really kind and really they're being very real. Lots of these guys are fresh out of prison. They don't know how to, to BS. They don't know how to put on a face for you. And all of them most of them had something in common, which is I recognized they were settled. They were calm. They had peace. And they had a different quality to them. Like this, they loved each other and they loved God. Because part of it was you had to wake up at like 5 o'clock, you go pray, read your Bible. And I saw these guys, like grown men, weeping on their knees and crying out to God. And I was like trying to sleep. Like I would just like sit in the pew in the chapel and pretend like I was praying and go to sleep and then like wake up. And they anointed me with oil and like prayed over me when I first got there. And I was literally like looking around like, could I fit through that window if I just burst through it? If I was like full of demons, man. I mean, like every male person of authority, I would have the most disgusting images. Like just, I couldn't get them out of my head. I had like, it wasn't intrusive thoughts. It was like, I had a different person living inside me that I hated and wished wasn't there. And, but I couldn't be free. So I stayed there for 3 months. And then these voices got really strong because I was resisting. At one point we were at church because I had to go to church with these folks, and nobody liked me there. None of my stuff worked. Like I tried to be like the funny guy and make jokes. Nobody was really into that. It all kind of fell flat. And I better plug my computer in. I'm such a noob. Give me 1 second, Sean.
Yeah, go for it. You're fine. And I'm going to put Mason's channel link in the live chat. And he's gone over 1,000 subscribers since we have began on this stream. So thank you for subscribing to Mason.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
We're connected now. So yeah, I these voices were really powerful at this time, and they would say things about me and things about the people around me, really hateful, ugly things that it was hard to discern what was my own voice and what was the voice of these entities that I'd invited to live in me. And that's part of the promise of Romans 1 is that, when God says, or when Paul's describing how things got the way they are in culture today, or in his day, and it still is this way today, he says that they rejected God. They started worshiping created things. They started worshiping themselves. So God gave them over to a deceived mind. He gave them over to a debased mind to do what ought not be done. That's the punishment for sin, is more sin. And he even says they were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They're full of envy, strife, deceit, maliciousness, and all kinds of perverse practices as well. And there was nothing off limits for me. I should mention, by the way, like whenever I was engaged in relationships with partners, I would purposefully try the most things that I could do because, one, I wanted to learn to take pleasure in things that were evil, because at this point I'm like, I want power from the demonic. And two, I just lost a sensitivity to, like I was untethered from innocence. I was totally corrupt. And I would hear these voices, right? So I'm in this rehab. I'm 3 months in. I had, hey, thanks, Mary. I would have these, like in church one time, there was this experience where the pastor stopped talking for a moment, and in the lull that came up when because they would make space for the Spirit of God to speak through other members of the church if he wanted. And as he was talking, this woman stood up behind me. And I should mention, at this time, I'm thinking about how I can break out of the rehab and go and find substances on the streets of Memphis. I'm like, how could I live as a homeless person in Memphis, Tennessee? Because we're in downtown Memphis. We would find tinners and teeners and little baggies on the ground and stuff, even on accident. So I'm like, I know I could find stuff. And so I'm thinking about how to leave. This woman stands up behind me and in a loud voice says something, I don't want to get it wrong, something to the effect of, you can run, but you can't hide. She's like, I've called you by name. You are mine. It doesn't matter what you've done in the past. I'm telling you, I'm coming for you. She says God, she's saying this, and I knew, like, this person's talking to me, and I wished it wasn't happening. And that's in 1 Corinthians, Paul says that's the Holy Spirit through Paul in the scriptures. He says that's the purpose of prophecy, it's part of the purpose is to make unbelievers fall on their face and have the secrets of their hearts exposed. And so this woman knew things she shouldn't have known about me. And I think that's another reason why the things I was doing, trying to commune with the other side, with deceased persons, trying to commune with the unseen realm and control my reality. That's why another reason why God prohibits that, because about like mediumship, or trying to or even trying to know the unforeseen future, which is part of the definition of magic or sorcery, or I'm trying to think of divination. That would be what the Bible calls divination, and the Bible condemns divination. That was something I was trying to practice. Like, how can I foresee the future and make it play out well for myself? And God doesn't prohibit those things, again, because he's mean and a cosmic, just wants to kill your joy. He's not a killjoy. He says they're off limits because there's dark power there. So everything from the horoscope to mediumship to consulting with the deceased, it's off limits because there's power there. He says, like, in one verse, I'm trying to call it to mind. He says, he's like, you go to the mediums who chirp and mutter and they tell you strange things. You go to these diviners who try to tell you he's like, should not my people come to me? He's like, shouldn't you come to your maker to know these things? And that ties in well with what I was saying about this woman stood up and she just pierced through to exactly what was happening. And it frightened me terribly. So when we try to control our realities using these mystical practices and mysterious, trying to figure out what our personality type is so that we can project or manifest certain things or whatever, it makes us God. It puts us in the position of where it robs us from the ability to go to God, to trust in him, to believe that he is the one sovereignly controlling the universe. And so, I left that place because I threatened my own health, and they couldn't keep me because they're not a medical facility. I left there, and I don't know how much time we have left, but I can probably shorten.
We've got about 30 minutes before the next show starts.
Sweet.
So take us through your recovery from this demonic realm.
I am happy to. And Sean, thank you for being such a good listener. I am happy to monologue and ramble, but interrupt me anytime with questions or anything.
My ideal guest, I just sit here and don't say anything. Makes it easy for me.
I love having guests on my channel too. Like on Sovereign Fire Studios, I'm like, I'll have like 10 questions, but sometimes I'll only ask 2 because I like hearing people talk,
Exactly.
So I left this place. And looming overhead was this knowledge that I had done things for which I could never atone. I could never make up for the ways that I had hurt people. I mean, I had done real damage to people. I mean, there are ODs, there are people who are still dealing with pain today because of the actions that I undertook, or by some extension through what I was pushing. So I left this place. I ran from God again, because this was like the most confrontational God had ever been with me. I was locked in a place with a bunch of Christians for 3 months, and every day had to wake up and be like, no, I'm not going this way. I love my sin. I love the ways of living I have. And I was still using manifestation, trying to call things into reality, trying to control my reality through these practices that I had learned as a young kid. And I had, once I left, the band started up again, and we actually had more notoriety than before. So we were kind of known for our live shows, our live performances, our recordings. We weren't like a recording artist band. I put on a show for people, and so we started playing everything from like drag shows and little festivals, and we had a mini tour lined up and stuff. Everything seemed to be going well. I was using again really quickly. A funny story about that I tell is when I went to band practice, like the second time, I found an old jean jacket that I used to have with patches all over it. And I found a jacket in my pockets. As I put it on, I pulled out I noticed there was like a lump, and I pulled it out, and there was a bag of 20 anti-anxiety bars, and then there was like $120 in the other pocket. And so I'm like, okay, we're back in business. I'm gonna start numbing again. And I ran. I ran from God. So I was eventually hooked on another cocktail of substances, and I felt true loneliness. Like nothing was working to numb the pain, the trauma from my past. Things seemed to be going well. Like I had a job at this time, finally, like a normal job in addition to playing music. The band was going well. I had a car for the first time, because I didn't even have my license till I was 21, because I was just too far gone to even like have an ID. And so things seemed to be going well, but I was more empty than before. I just felt like nothing had value, nothing had meaning or purpose so much anymore. And I was still practicing these, like I upped the magical practices, like magic with a K, trying different rituals, different rites and incantations to give me like pleasure, to give me joy, to give me peace, really trying to pursue my own kingdom still, and trying to, have some kind of peace. And I had a Halloween show that we were playing as a band, and I invited like my whole friend list. And to that show came this woman who, man, she really stood out to me. She was like illuminated. I met her after the show. We had talked online briefly, and then she had told me that it wasn't worth her time to be friends with me, because I was just so I was talking to 6 girls at the same time, trying to just like, I wasn't satisfied with anybody. I was doing the most depraved, perverse things I could imagine, and nothing satisfied me. And so I met this girl, and she stood out to me, not because like, oh wow, I really want to satisfy, myself with her. It was like she stood out to me in a different kind of way. So we went on a date. That woman is now my wife. Her name's Courtney. But we went on a date, and she had a tattoo on her arm. And actually, I had gone on a date with her because I heard that she could get a certain substance that I needed and I was having withdrawals from. And she had a tattoo on her arm of Romans 5:8, which is, oh man, now it escapes me. In this, we know what love is. No, not that we have love. Yeah, no, that's a different verse. Romans 5:8 is, even in our sin, or while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. In this we know love, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And so I had the verse memorized at that time. I don't know why it escapes me now, but so that interested me, that she had this like conviction. She was not a Christian, but she believed that it was true. You can intellectually agree that something's true without being devoted to it, without actually turning from your sin and believing in Jesus and trusting him with your life. So we started a relationship, and something was different. Like, I really didn't want to hurt her. I really wanted to help, to like be a help to her, but I realized I'm the type of person that totally will cheat on her and wreck her, you know? And I didn't want to do that. So that caused me some guilt. I remember there was a crossroads of sorts. I had been to some crossroads before where there is a clear course of action that will take me toward evil, and a clear course of action that will take me toward the direction of God and righteousness. And there's these moments of clarity where you're like, if I go this way, something bad's going to happen. So I had bought some girl, some white, and I had a ball of it in my pocket. And this girl that I was dating now, Courtney, she was not cool with that. She'd never dated an addict. She did not know that. We'd been at the club all night. She was cool with like drinking and smoking, but like she didn't like the other stuff. And I realized, I had this moment of clarity. I can either tell her that I have this stuff on me and get rid of it, or I can lie to her and do the same thing that I've done 100 times with every other relationship I've been in, and seriously damage her. And so I knew it was God talking to me, because there was a purity to the truth of what he was saying. And I was like, okay, I'm going to tell her, because I don't want to hurt this girl. I wanted to like do the right thing. And so I told her. It was horrible. It was, she had like a nervous breakdown. I flushed the stuff down the toilet. And that's kind of how our relationship was. I would have a relapse and she would be heartbroken and like break up with me. We were both kind of a mess. She had her own stuff going on and past hurts. Me too. And I took an interest in, I started to see how profoundly I was trapped. Like, I couldn't break out of this cycle that I was in. And I could see how condemned I really was. Like I was talking about Ephesians 2, we're children of wrath like the rest of mankind by nature. That's what the Bible says. We've all sinned. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. There's no like, well, I do some pretty good things sometimes, or like, I'm trying to get my life back on track. I'm really trying to be better and help others. That's not so from a Christian worldview, that there is no way to heaven that involves you being that involves you climbing your way there. That's what separates it from every other worldview, is that in these other worldviews, you ascend, you become enlightened, you learn enough, you detach from this world, or in Islam, you will you submit. That's what the word Islam means, is like a it's not submission. I think it is submission, actually. It's like Allah, you submit to what he says. The difference is, in Christianity, God has come down to us. That's the crux. He becomes a man. The Son, the Father gives his Son, the second person of the Trinity. He becomes a man, and he lives a perfect life in our place, and then suffers the way we deserve to suffer in our place. And he he passes away. He is in the tomb for 3 days. He rises again, is seen by 500 people, is seen by his disciples. They eat with him, they touch him. This is a historical event, at least to be reckoned with. You could say it didn't happen, but you have to at least explain why so many people believe that they had seen him on the cross, saw him go into the tomb, a body, and then saw him rise again. And so this was something I really started to take an interest in. Courtney would send me sermons and things, and I found that, like, while I didn't like the idea of it, because if I believed in this Jesus guy, like if I believed that was true, I had to let go of all these other things, like manifestation, all of my magical practices, horoscope, tarot card readings. I had to let go of all of it, mediumship, my immorality, my perverseness, all the things I took pleasure in and felt like gave me control over my life. I had to let go of them. And that's really scary. Like that's why they call it being born again. And it's also called, it is also called, I don't know if I'm allowed to even say the word, but it makes it hard to describe the gospel. So I will say it. Dying to self is what they call it. So you pass away, like in, there's a verse that talks about, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. All this comes from God, who through Christ reconciles us to himself. So God is the one who makes things right between us and him. We can't do it. We can't work our way there, and gives us the ministry of reconciliation. And that's why Christians are evangelistic, and we want to share the grace with others. So the way that this actually happened was, I was at work. I was on this cocktail of substances I was always on, and I felt this darkness like descend on me. I felt like I was just being crushed by anxiety and by the guilt of the things I'd done in the past. Nothing gave me relief. And I put my head down while I was at work at this call center, and I felt this approach again, this very familiar voice. And so, even someone in the audience knows what I'm talking about. They felt this presence calling them toward truth, toward Jesus. But I'd always resisted it for those reasons I mentioned before. And this time I was like, I don't have any fight left. I'm not going to fight. So I felt this presence come, and I felt God communicate all at once. Like this love just swelled within me, like just washing over me, that I was loved. I was seen, like to my core. All of my horrible deeds that I had done, everything that I was as a person, he saw me, and then lavished love on me, like overflowing love and peace. I had this peace come, but before any of that, I also felt this tension of he's just. So I felt this like holiness that made me uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Like God doesn't sin, he hates sin, and I'm a sinner. So I felt like I'm in trouble in this light. I'm kind of like a cockroach in the light right now. And but I didn't resist him. I was just like, okay. I didn't know very much. I'm like, God, you can have me. Like I give myself to you. You win. You're the boss. But I believe you can forgive sins. Like I believe in your son Jesus. I believe that he died on the cross. I believe that he rose again. But I can't change myself. Like I've tried all these different ways. I give up my control to you. And I was like, but you have to change me. You have to do all the work. Like I'll do everything I can, but you know that I can't do this. And I felt this overwhelming peace just like wash over me. All of the guilt was still there. Like I had done stuff I had to make amends for, but I was like clean for the first time. I felt like I am a new person. So I called my girlfriend. I'm like, find a church for us to go to. And she's like, okay, whatever. She knew I was having a hard time. So she's like, okay. And I was, crying to her. And so we went to this church, and I just sat in the pews. There was the church members were walking around in a prayer circle, and we're praying. And I sat down with nobody except for Courtney, and I just like poured out in tears. And I was like, I just told God everything that I could think of, confessed every sin I could think of. I'm like, and I know I can't even remember them all. That's not the point. It's not like God's like, oh, you missed one, to hell with you. You get to go the lake of fire with you. But I just I wanted to confess these things to him, because I'd been hiding them in my heart for so long that I just couldn't do it anymore. And so I confessed to him, and I started to have this different view of Jesus. Like at first I thought like he's a good teacher. I could probably incorporate him in my religion somehow. But he's actually, he doesn't leave you to believe anything other than he's either a liar. So he didn't, because he claimed to be God. He claimed that he could forgive sins. He healed the blind. He healed the lame. So like, he's either a liar and said he was God, wasn't. He's either a lunatic and believed he was God, believed he had all these powers, but he really didn't. And then he just, he went to the cross, into the tomb, and stayed there. Or he is who he says he is, and he is Lord. Liar, lunatic, or Lord. And for the first time, I saw him as the third. I was like, he is. In Colossians 1, it talks about what happens when you're born again. And this is a good description of what was going on for me at this time when I was at this church. It says, he has delivered us from the domain of darkness. So from this rule of tyranny, of worship of self and doing whatever you want, whenever you want to do it. He's delivered us, because that's really slavery to the devil. And he's delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. So he washes us, he regenerates us, makes us new, and puts us in a totally different category of being. And then it goes on to talk about Jesus. This is who Jesus claims to be and who the Bible says he is. It says he is the image of the invisible God. So he's what's visible. He is how we see God. He's the creator of all things, visible and invisible, whether on earth or in heaven, thrones, rulers, dominions, or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. So he's the creator of all things. This is this Jesus. And it says he is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might be preeminent. He's the head of the body, the church. He is, for in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him God reconciles to himself all things. So Jesus claimed he was going to judge the world. Like, that's a really scary thing, a sketchy thing to say if you're not actually who you say you are. He can't be just a good teacher. He's either a really bad teacher, a lunatic, a liar, or he is Lord. And I came to see him as he is, like, he manifests himself to me. I felt his presence. I knew he was talking to me. I knew he was speaking to me. Things would happen. Like, if you're watching this is one of those pokes that God is giving you, where you're confronted with this reality, and you can either shake it off and be like, okay, yeah, that's great for Mason. He was a really bad guy. I'm glad he found something that works for him. Or you can realize what I'm saying is an exclusive claim to objective truth. What I'm saying is, no, this is objective reality. We don't have to like it. We don't have to like everything. I don't have to like that the sky is blue, but it is. And it objectively is. And I'm not saying that with any pride at all. But my eyes were opened, and I was transformed, and now I'm perfect. No, I'm just kidding, dude. I mean, before God, my sins are forgiven. I'm holy and blameless before him, but like, things did not get better for me right away. I was not like, oh, wow, I'm finally prosperous and healthy. And, no, I had big problems to deal with. Like, the addictions to substances fell off gradually. The addiction to adult content was way harder to deal with. Every time I did it, I felt guilty, and shameful, which happens no matter what you believe. Like, everybody recognized the post shame that you have from that. You're like, oh, can't believe I was doing that. But it was really multiplied after that. And I got married to this woman, Courtney, who is now my wife and the mother of my 3 children. And yeah, I delivered our baby 2 months ago. So
wow, what a transformation, man.
Yeah, things were not perfect. The most suffering I've ever been through, I should say, has been since I've been a Christian. And we're promised that Jesus says, in this world you will have trouble, but don't be afraid. Like, I've overcome the world. Don't be troubled. And that's his promises. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. And when you go through the fire, when you walk through the fire, you're not going to be burned. He's like, even if you lose your life, what are they going to do? Send you to heaven? Oh, big deal. Like, come and get me. And these demonic forces that were talking to me and clinging on to me all the time, I forgot to mention, when God confronted me, boom, scattered. Now they would come creeping back when I would dip back into my old behaviors, but when I would call out to Jesus, you try this. If you have sleep paralysis, if you have night terrors like I used to have to, or if you feel dark presences around you, cry out to Jesus in earnest, like in honesty, cry out to him and ask for his help and watch the cockroaches scatter, baby. I mean, it's powerful.
Are you ready to take some questions before the next show starts? We've got
Yeah,
about
let's do
15
it.
minutes left.
Let's do it.
Well, the main thing they've been asking, pointing out, is you look too young to have gone through all of this. How old are you? And you've got 3 kids and you're married.
Yeah,
People are saying you look. Go on. How old are you?
I am 27.
27. Okay.
Yeah. And I got started early, so I started using whenever I was 15, and I had a lot of time to get it all in.
So Abundantly is asking what was the name of the cult you grew up in. It wasn't Scientology, it was a Christian cult, you said, didn't you?
Yeah, it was. It actually started out as like a traditional Pentecostal church, but it would have been, I would classify it in the word of faith category. Some are more culty than others. This one was really isolated and really culty.
So Deborah's wondering, do you still have moments you have to fight that programming as an adult? People don't understand how deep it goes.
Yeah, for sure. So like, for example, I had a friend, and by programming, I assume you're talking about the programming of the cult behaviors. Yeah. Because a big staple of that cult was like, if you have enough faith, you can do any. If you believe it enough, God will act in your on your behalf. So you'll be healed or whatever it is if you have enough faith. And I still will wrestle with that sometimes, but it's helped a lot for me to read the Bible. Like in times when Jesus, there's this guy who has a son who is being oppressed by demons, and so much so that the demons throw him into the water, throw him into the fire, and try to end this poor kid's life. And Jesus he says to Jesus, "If you can, heal my son. Like if you can, please do." And Jesus says, "If I can." With a question like, if I can, anything will be done for him who believes. And the guy says, "I believe, help my unbelief." He's like, "Please do this, I believe, not enough, help my unbelief." And Jesus heals the guy. So it's not always tied to faith. God is sovereign and he does whatever he wants to, whether or not faith is involved, but he does act upon the faithful prayers of his people. And that's something I get into a lot on Sovereign Fire Studios. We go into theological topics like that.
You earlier on referenced music that was steering you into the demonic realm, and this question pertains to that. They were asking if you mean music like P. Diddy.
Yeah, good old Diddley. Like I wasn't really into him. I liked real gangsta stuff, like Gucci Mane. I really like when Lil Wayne exploded on the scene. I was like, this guy can rap. Eminem as well, like people who were really talking about violent and demonic stuff. That was more what I was into. And metal, really liked occult metal.
And Diana wants to know, what do you think about people who speak in tongues?
Yeah, it's a spiritual gift that's referenced in 1 Corinthians 12 and 12 through 14 talk about the spiritual gifts, and it's one that is like, there's no place in the Bible where it says these gifts will cease. And so I do believe they continue. And I've seen them abused a lot, though. You see the televangelist on TV and he's like, put your hand up against the screen and also give me $1,000 and then God will heal your cancer or whatever. And he speaks in tongues. Or the people who believe that you're not a Christian unless you speak in tongues. I totally disagree with that. Disavow that. Nothing in the scriptures would make me believe that. But I do believe it's a spiritual gift that continues to this present day, and that it's given to some, because Paul says, not all speak in tongues, or do all prophesy? Are all apostles? Do all speak in tongues? And the answer is no.
Which ties into a question from Lisa about, can religions be used as scams?
Yeah, they are all the time. Look at Scientology. I mean, Mormonism was created by a treasure hunting known con man who it still persists to this day, and people defend it. And and they're super nice. Mormons are. I grew up with Mormons, but they believe that we're all little gods. We're going to get our own planets. That God has a heavenly mother. That I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses, same thing. I mean, there's people who really believe these things, but there are people who benefit from their belief in this. So yes, religion can be used to control the masses, and Christianity has been used that way as well. I mean, look at the Roman Catholic Church and the ways that it erred and strayed into control and, give me money to have your sins forgiven, and if you do enough good works, then your sins are forgiven. If you pray the right prayers, your sins will be forgiven. When the Bible specifically says, like Jesus says, anyone who comes to me, I will by no means cast out. Like if whoever believes in me will never or whoever comes to me shall not hunger. Whoever believes in me will never thirst. He's like, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. You come directly to me. The Bible says there's no mediator between God and man except the man Christ Jesus. He's the one you pray to, the one that you trust in. When you turn from your sin and put your faith in Jesus Christ, that his crucifixion, his suffering on the cross was for you. It was an atonement for your sins. The Bible promises that God will wipe away your sins. He'll forgive your sins, but not only that, he'll give you perfect righteousness, the righteousness of Jesus. So he sees you as perfectly righteous, even though you sin. You continue to sin. You repent when you do, and then he promises to give you the Holy Spirit as a down payment of this. So if you want to test that out, turn from your sin, trust in Jesus, pray, ask for his forgiveness, and God will, if you're honest, you're earnest, and you believe, he will give you the Holy Spirit as proof.
Yeah, let me add a little bit to the scam side as well. So when I was in Arizona, I knew a guy who was suing the Catholic Church because of what a priest did to him when he was a kid.
Yeah.
And he got all this legal discovery. And for this diocese in Tucson, he was showing me how many houses the Catholic Church owned. Like every street, they owned houses. I said, how is this possible? He says, because they're telling these old people that if you leave us the house, you get a place in heaven. And they don't even wait till they die. They shuffle them over to a Catholic care home, and they take the house. They take the house right away.
Holy smoke! I didn't realize that. But that's kind of a common theme throughout the Roman Catholic Church. Like in the Crusades, they told people, if you go to fight in this war, man, you got spiritual blessings in heaven. You're going to be, you can be forgiven. Or if you go to this holy site, then you'll be forgiven. When Jesus claims he's the only one with the power to forgive sins. And so that's why I'm a Protestant. Part of why I'm a Protestant. Also, the Catholic Church didn't want the Bible printed in the most common language. And so Martin Luther was like, yeah, we're going to do it anyway. And Martin Luther was not perfect, not pretty as a historical figure, but I'm a Protestant and Reformed because I believe that the only way to God is we're saved by grace, by God's free gift of grace through faith in Jesus Christ. And this is not our own doing. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast, just as Ephesians says.
You got two questions that tie together here, so I'll do both of them at the same time. Yvonne wants to know, do you still hear the voices of demons? And Laureen wants to know, do you still feel dark presences anymore?
I definitely discern dark presences still. Am I still connected with you, Sean?
Yeah. I'm just going to change my battery. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah. I am still, I discern when there are dark entities around. I'm not always like perfectly discerning, but yeah, I feel some dark presences and foul presences. For example, I was going through recovery for these adult content, these images I used to be addicted to. And as I was digging into some things in my past and unpacking things and really working to trust God with this thing, I was working through a workbook, and my wife and I both looked up, and at the same time, we were both filled with like horrible fear, and saw this little orb of light in our living room just like fall to the ground and disappear. And for whatever reason, we were horrified. So we sang a song to Jesus and prayed, and the fear left. I will often have dreams. I even had one last night where I'm approached by these. They have a word for them, succubus. I don't know if that's like the Bible doesn't talk about succubus, but there are these kinds of entities that come after men and women alike who are trying to cause you to sin in your dreams. And I have those approach at times. Yeah, but like I said, you say the name of Jesus in your dream. If you can like start to think about and say the word Jesus, the dream just crumbles.
So Pam wants to know, do you have to convert to Christianity in order to be forgiven by God?
So I don't know if it's about converting to Christianity, but Jesus said, if we're to take him seriously, he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And so maybe thinking about it less as a religion. And I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, I've got a relationship, not a religion. I think that's like you're kind of just splitting hairs at that point. But I do believe Jesus is the only way to God. He claimed to be the only one able to forgive sins, and the Bible makes the claim that there is no other name given among men under heaven by which we must be saved, is what Acts says. There is no other way to God. So yes, I do subscribe to that. And yeah, I should have said succubus and incubus is the male form of that. That dude was right.
Right, we've got 3 minutes left, and Kay's wondering, how can I help a friend who is a second-generation Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say don't go into it arrogantly, but really search the scriptures and know their arguments, because the thing about cults is they train their followers and their adherents. They know the arguments they're going to make and the ones that you're going to make. Don't be intimidated though. God promises that when you stand before people to witness to the power of Jesus and to witness to the truth, he will give you the words to say. So study and then trust God and let them know you want to have a conversation that's going to be difficult about religion, and don't surprise them with it. Don't just drop it as a bomb on them, but make time for it and have the conversation and be bold.
So Diana says, you've inspired me to get back to the church and God.
Well, praise God. I'm really, really happy about that. Yeah.
TT's wondering about helping others that have been through similar situations. Well, there's two situations. There was the cult, and then there was the substances and the addictions. Do you have a mentor, or talk to other people who are going through those things?
Yeah. So I have a mentor. I have mentors myself, and then I have been able to in my church, I lead a men's group. I'm the director of musical worship at a church called Emmaus Church in Kansas City, Missouri. And then on my YouTube channel and on my podcast that goes out to all platforms, Sovereign Fire Studios, we do a lot of work talking about God, theology, addiction. And I've had there's numerous encounters where I've been able to walk with people as they find freedom through the healing power of Jesus Christ. And so yeah, that's that. And also I've loved being able to get like one-on-one time with younger men who can avoid all of the stuff that I plunged into and study the Bible with them.
Mason, you're a phenomenal speaker. You're so well researched, so articulate, so well educated, and you are radiant with just positive energy and vibrancy and love and light, which is incredible. It just makes your story, this transformation from the depths of hell, all the more remarkable. And we commend you for what you're doing. And viewers, if you want to support Mason on his mission, please click on the links in the description box. He's got over 1,000 subscribers. He's gone over that while we've been on this live.
Yeah.
And I've put his link down there again. And is there anything you'd like to say to the viewers in conclusion, my friend?
Yeah, thank you, Sean, for what you said. Yeah, I think what that second to last question asked really is the point that I would want to say. There's a lot that I left out, but when you look into the scriptures, Jesus claims to be the only way to God. He claims to be the only one to be able to forgive sins. If God is good, if he is loving, he has to punish sin. He has to punish sinners. And we all happen to fall into that category. And so the big question of life is, how do we be forgiven of sins? How, and is it like, can we work it off? Can we do the right things? Try that in a court of law. They're like, you're here for these things. And you say to the judge, well, I'm doing a lot of charity work. He's like, okay, whatever. You're here for these crimes. I'm here to punish these crimes. So we know that doesn't work. It is the only way to God is through faith in Jesus Christ, and through the grace, the free gift of salvation that he offers all people. So turn to him today, turn from your sin, trust in him. And I'd love to talk with you. If you want to message me through my socials, I'm happy to talk with you, and we can continue our discussion. Sean, thank you for having me on.
Oh, thanks, Mason. Much love and light to you, and you have a great rest of your day. I'll let you go and close the show. So take care, my friend.
Thanks,
you.
Sean.
Cheers. Bye. What a phenomenal guest. So inspirational. And if there were any questions outstanding, if you didn't put them in the chat, or if they're unanswered, with Mason's links in the description box, he's also provided his email, sovereignfirestudios@gmail.com. And there's his Instagram handle down there. So it's very easy to get hold of him if you guys want to. And we have got Ron's coming up next. He's got a show coming on. Let me just have a look, actually, because we've got so much content coming over the weekend. I'm losing track. So Ron as next. He's got How the Paranormal Shook My Life. Is that Shook My Life? Dan's story. Yep. So that's his partner who just had the baby with. And then we have got tomorrow, we've got Julia is coming on for part, must be over a dozen now. We've got Beverly. We've got on Sunday, we've not put it up yet. All right, so we've got Meghan Markle, Oprah Winfrey, Hollywood Fires on Monday with Emily and Jen. And we've also got Gemma coming on, who was a grooming gang survivor. And she's going to be coming on soon to talk about what she went through, which is going to be a harrowing content one. But we will sort that out, the date and times, shortly. Anyway, check out Ron. He's live on the channel.